Hey everybody, this is Sasquatchers, Andrew and John as always, and today we are being joined by a really interesting guest and we're going to talk about some really cool stuff. His name is Nick Hayes, and after the intro, I'm going to pass it over to him and let him introduce himself.
The truth is out there. Never stop looking. Never be sheep. Always disrupt. We are the ungovernable. We are the truth seekers. We are Sasquatchers.
And
Okay,
we
hi
are
everybody.
here. Yes. Go ahead, Nick.
Hi everybody. I'm Nick Hayes. I'm from Oxford, UK, and I'm a UFO and paranormal photographer and author of the book Quest for the Invisibles, which was published by the Book Tree in 2016. I take photographs and film in the infrared and the ultraviolet parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, and I've been doing this work since early 2010 until present day. And I've got a website, questfortheinvisibles.co.uk, where you can see best of my photographic and video footage. I've also got a YouTube channel, which is QFTI, and lots of other things. I've written a few papers over. Well, I've written just about to have another paper published. I wrote a paper last year called "Positive Findings on Constable's Organotic Bioforms," which is all about invisible biological UFOs existing in the infrared and the ultraviolet. So there's a few interesting things that I've done in my time.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a UFO enthusiast. I don't like to really claim to be an expert on any facet of it. It's just
No.
something that I'm really into. And honestly, up until I discovered you and your work, this was not something that I was familiar with. So I'm actually really looking forward to this chat and kind of learning a little more about it and taking a deeper dive into it because at least stateside, that's not something that we really talk about or see too much in the UFO field.
No, which is weird because a big influence on me is Trevor James Constable, who actually did his work from the USA in the late 1950s. But his work has been largely ignored, and this is what I'm trying to put out there because he was a pioneer in this type of photography, capturing invisible living UFOs. He did capture sort of nuts and bolts type things, but these were biological living UFOs existing in the infrared. And these things do come into the visible spectrum, but they seem to be mainly in the invisible. But his work that really pioneering work that really started me on with my work. But if you want, I'll explain how I got into this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what happened to me was basically going back to about Christmas 2008, Christmas Day evening. I took my dog Elfie for a walk. Now it's very icy, very misty, very dark night, and you couldn't see more than about 4 or 5 feet in front of you. And what happened was I was so cold. I walked him down the park, and then I decided to walk him back for an alleyway. And we got to the end of the alleyway, and he wanted to go back down the alleyway. So I begrudgingly agreed to take him down. And as we went down the end of the alleyway, he started sniffing around near a substation. Now I stood there freezing cold, thinking, "Come on," and while I was waiting for him, I just started staring up at the sky, and I noticed that the substation had a roof on it, which reminded me of the Great Pyramid. Reminded me of a view that I had when I was in Egypt, looking at the Great Pyramid. And I just started staring at it and seeing how the lights were reflecting because it was so misty. The lights were flickering almost, and they were sort of like a weird orange color on top of the substation. And as I was looking, I saw this pink to orange glow, way in the distance, probably about 200 foot in the air. And it was moving really slowly and totally silently. And it was so misty and foggy, I could hardly see it. What happened was I stood there watching it, wondering what the hell it was. And it got nearer and nearer and nearer. And just as it was about to pass over the top of me, I moved backwards and stared up at it. And there was like a thinner pocket of fog, which allowed me to see this thing in its entirety. And it seemed to be made of light or energy. And it had a domed top and a domed bottom. And it wasn't quite flying saucer shape, but it seemed to be breathing like it was alive. And it reminded me of one of those bioluminescent life forms from the deep ocean. So I followed it for about 10 minutes. It was only going about 3 or 4 miles an hour. And I followed it until I got out to this park area, which was quite remote, and it stopped. And, bear in mind, this was about 200 foot above me. My dog was acting really weird. And I started getting a bit worried because I really didn't know what this thing was. Half of me was thinking it was a craft and they might, beam me up or something, and the other half was looking at it as a living creature, which is a concept I'd never heard of before. So basically, I'd got a camera for Christmas that day, and I just got sick of it because I'd been taking pictures of the animals all day, so I didn't have my camera on me. So I ran back to the house with my dog, dumped my dog Alfie off, got my other dog Lucy, went running back down there, couldn't see it. It was like, what? So I dumped Lucy off, and I basically decided to go back down by myself. And it was about 10 o'clock at this point. So I climbed over a load of fences, took a shortcut, and I couldn't see it again. And all of a sudden, I saw it through the fog, and I managed to get a couple of seconds of shaky footage of it. But one of those had a still in it which showed the shape. So I knew that I, got an image of it at the time. So anyway, and then it just sort of disappeared. So I went home, and I just couldn't sleep. I was up all night. I'd never encountered a UFO in the first place. I'd always believed in UFOs, but the fact that this thing seemed to be breathing and that it was alive was a concept I'd never heard of before. So it disturbed me greatly. So for about 3 or 4 months, I was looking on the internet trying to find anything about. I mean, I didn't even know how to describe it. In those days, I didn't have the words biological UFO in my mind, so or living UFO. So I just basically tried to find things that were similar shape. And I was just about to give up after about 3 or 4 months, and a friend came round and told me about a video he'd seen with a guy called Trevor James Constable on it. So Trevor James Constable was a New Zealander who moved to America. Now, in the 1950s, he went into the desert, Mojave Desert of Southern California, where using a standard 35 millimeter camera loaded with infrared film, he captured the first known images of invisible biological UFOs in the infrared part of the spectrum. And that made sense to me because this thing I saw actually looked like it was alive as well. So I sent off for Trevor James Constable's book, which was a 2008 reissue of The Cosmic Pulse of Life, which is the most famous book that he's done. And I read that book, and I sent off for his early 1958 book, They Live in the Sky. And I just got so engrossed in these books that I actually wrote to Constable, who was in his late 70s at the time, and told him that I'd seen a UFO and that I was really impressed with his book. And he wrote back to me and encouraged me to go ahead. And I said to him, look, I can't really afford to use infrared film and cameras and stuff. I want to try digital. And he said, yeah, try digital. And he kind of, he egged me on really in a sense. So I decided to start Quest for the Invisibles, my own little quest just for myself to capture my own photographic images of perhaps living UFOs. Now, the main problem Constable had, and the problem I had, was these things being invisible. You've got to track them to your location. And then when you track them there, how would you know they're there? Because they're invisible. The Constable used an exercise called the star exercise, which involves putting your body in a star shape and oscillating yourself across the north, south, and east, west lines of the Earth. And you find when you oscillate yourself across it, it face east in the morning before sunrise, and it's oscillating himself across the north, south line and the east, west lines, and it do it up to 100 times. And every time you pass over these lines, it sends a pulse. You can feel it in your hands, and it sends a pulse up into the ether, and this is what he used to attract the creatures to his area. And he used a technique where he'd relax his eyes and he'd look past the sky rather than at it, and you can get, using that technique, you can get little glimpses of invisible things in the sky, so just flashes of light, or sometimes you can see a shimmering variation to the otherwise smooth blue sky background of the sky. So this is how he managed to attract and identify these objects. But he captured lots and lots of different ones, huge amoeba-like objects, which had vacuoles on them and markings, which you'd normally see on something from under the microscopical world. He also captured lots of spherical UFOs, big groups of them, and a whole variety of other things. And this is what started my work. And so I basically set out to try and capture my own footage of these things. Constable later went on to use a cloudbuster, which was it's to do with orgone energy. It was invented by Dr. Wilhelm Reich in the 1940s, and it consists of a load of hollow tubes grounded in water and arrayed on some kind of pivoting device so that you can aim it at the sky. And it basically does the same sort of thing as the star exercise. It sends a pulse and it manipulates the orgone energy potential in the sky. I'm not sure if you guys are that familiar with orgone energy. It's chi prana. The same sort of thing.
Uh,
But Dr. Reich found it in all living beings and also in the atmosphere, and he found he could manipulate it and hold back weather fronts and create rain and bust clouds, basically get rid of clouds. So he used it for weather manipulation, as did Constable in his later work. But they was actually using it as a UFO attraction device for many years. So I basically built a cloudbuster as well, because I've got back problems. I couldn't really do the star exercise because I've got a few problems with the lower spine. So for a while, I used the cloudbuster, which I'd aim up into the sky, and I set up infrared camera, filming in movie mode to start with, and also full spectrum camcorders, which I've got, and I'd film in the infrared and the ultraviolet. And I'd later start using a Geiger counter. I use a Geiger radiation counter now to detect both UFOs in the sky at very high heights, and also the more paranormal things that I've caught in my area where I film. So that's basically, I started using a Geiger counter to detect these things, and that's how my work sort of progressed. And through Constable, I found out about a group called the GRCU, who were an Italian UFO research group from the 1980s, led by Luciano Bocconi, and they backed up Constable's work by capturing similar things in the infrared. So I was very, very influenced by the book La Realtà UFO La Realtà Nascosta, which was the GRCU book, or Luciano Bocconi book, which basically means UFO is a hidden reality. So I got more and more absorbed into the whole world of invisible UFOs, and I recorded solidly for 5 years in the ultraviolet and the infrared, almost every day I could. I was filming at 50 frames a second, and some of these objects were only appearing on 1 or 2 frames. As you see the things I sent you, the pictures, you see there's fish-like forms on there and all sorts of strange things. And it was very, very hard work. But so that's basically what I was doing for a long time, capturing things in the infrared at night and in the daytime, and then filming in the ultraviolet also in the daytime. Using various different techniques to capture these things. So, if there's anything you're particularly interested in, any of the techniques, if you want to know more about them,
yeah. There's a plethora of questions. I saw when I was perusing your website. You have what you kind of referred to as a jellyfish UFO that is captured, and you can kind of see what would look like a tentacle on a
That's right.
jellyfish.
Yeah, that's my first capture in the ultraviolet.
And so, did you see that there was a jellyfish UFO over? I can't remember if it was Israel or Iran over the weekend, but
No, I have heard of similar things though before. But
yeah, so that caught my interest because there was one that was caught, and it looked like it was like a night vision kind of camera from the military. So
yeah,
that one was fresh in my head. So I thought it was really neat that that's like the first image that I found on your website was also one of those I guess jellyfish is what they're called,
yeah.
and it's kind of like a neat synchronicity that it happened just within hours of each other that occurred, and that I had seen that. So
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I said, the jellyfish was moving tentacles first. I've captured a couple of them, but that was probably but I mean, it's quite a small still from it. It was quite small, but it's there, isn't it? It's definitely there. And you can see the tentacles.
For sure.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of footage on telly where people have captured these things in the visible, and they're slowly floating through the sky. But this thing was whizzing by. I found that when I filmed in the infrared, the ultraviolet, what I use is a thing called the sun obliteration technique. What I do is I use a roof, 1-story roof, which slants at 45 degrees, and I block the sun behind the roof. And I basically film straight up the roof. I use a full spectrum camcorder. I'll explain about camcorders and cameras. Basically, when you get a normal camcorder or camera, they have a lens in them, which basically we call a hot mirror, which blocks invisible light. So I basically sent my camera and camcorder off for conversions. Now with the camera, I sent the camera off, and what they did, they removed this hot filter, and they put an infrared filter in it. So basically, I use a 720 nanometer infrared pass filter, so everything's blocked. All the visible light up to about 720 is blocked. So it sees a tiny amount of the barely visible red that occurs just before the infrared. And so it blocks all the rest of the color, and it blocks the ultraviolet. So it's almost a pure infrared image. And now with the camcorders, I've got 2 camcorders. I've got these made full spectrum. So what they do is they remove the blocking filter, which blocks the invisible, and they put clear quartz in there. And that allows you now to see infrared, ultraviolet, and visible light. So, and you can use different filters that can pass or block whatever you want. So for instance, I use an ultraviolet filter, which blocks visible light and color, and it passes just ultraviolet, which is this one you're seeing on the screen now. That was one of my early ones. And these things seem to be moving on a west to east flow, a really fast flow, which seems to be flowing across the top of the house in a west to east direction, which is something Dr. Reich talked about. This was one of my early ones. You can see the three-dimensionality of the very top edge of it. And that's not something you see in nature. You don't see square type edges like that. You know, it looks like it's been carved out of wood or something, but this thing was moving really fast. It only appeared in one frame. It was filmed at 25 frames a second. And you can see the sun coming up behind the wall. So that's what I do. I let the sun come up like that. And what it does, it creates what I call the illumination zone, which is an area above the rooftop. And when these objects go through it or above it or just beyond it, they're totally lit up by the sun, by the ultraviolet light from the sun, just for a fraction of a second, and they appear in the ultraviolet. Some of them are self-illumined and don't need lighting up, but I'd say a majority of the ones that I've captured, you can only see them for that split instant as they hit the sunlight.
Ah, that's incredible.
So you can see how what it's doing. I film because I'm filming sort of straight up at 45 degrees. It helps me to catch these things side on. As you can see, I get them at some quite nice angles. And I mean, this thing doesn't make sense, does it? Really, when you look at it, it's almost fish-like, but it's got a strange mouth-like feature. But it's a very strange object, and I've only ever caught one of these.
Yeah, it's hard to even kind of guess what overall shape that it could possibly be. And
yeah,
and
this
there
one
on
here,
screen is
this was spinning through itself. Yeah, this one was captured at 50 frames a second in HD. It was actually moving from right to left, and it was spinning through itself. The fish-like shape was spinning through itself. The center bit stayed as it is, the brown bit, but the actual, you'll see it reversing around as it travels from right to left. It was spinning really fast, and that's something I found a lot in this invisible world. A lot of things spin rather than just moving. Say, normal fish, obviously, even skyfish move through the sky like a fish, but these things spin through themselves really, really fast. And this was filmed at 50 frames a second, and it only appeared on 4 frames.
Yeah.
And,
did you also capture a comet in this? Or
no,
like
that's actually no, that's actually a piece of spider web that was blowing. Yeah, it's attached. There's one down the bottom, but it's actually attached right the way along, but it's only catching the sun at that point. It's actually a piece of spider web with a bit on it, which was blowing in the wind. It's actually attached. Yeah, it's attached to something, but you can't actually see the rest of it. But it looks like a comet or plane. No.
It does.
But they definitely look plasmatic, made of heat. These things.
Yeah, no, so for like the longest time, one of the paranormal, maybe I call them cryptids. I don't know if I want to go into that, but the atmospheric beasts have always interested me. There's a possibility that there are carbon-based organic life forms living in the atmosphere. Now, do you connect these with that, or is this a separate?
Yeah. These are plasmoidal. Basically, their existence is heat. They're plasma-like. That's why they're appearing, because they're radiation. They're appearing in the infrared and the ultra. Well, these ones are appearing in the ultraviolet, but a lot of the other stuff is appearing in the infrared. But it's basically they're heat-based. They've got their form in heat substance, which is plasmoidal. Basically, they're heavily reflected. It's almost like they're made of glass, and when they come across, they're made of glass and they're invisible. And as they come across and catch the light, they're being lit up. That's the sort of analogy I normally use to try and explain it to people. But once they're past the illumination zone, which you can see lit up, they're invisible even to the ultraviolet, a lot of them, apart from the ones that are self-illumined. But I've captured a lot of fish-like form. Yeah. I mean, the whole skyfish thing went on, for a while. Everyone was talking about that. But a lot of those things were insects. They were kind of, when you record an insect, you get repeats of the wings due to the interlaced video recording. But that's another subject. But this is another strange one that seemed to change its shape as it moved. And this was captured, I think, at 25 frames per second. As you can see, again, the sun is right down below the top of the gutter. This is one of the more strange ones, especially like the one on the. This was going from right to left. You can see it's almost sort of like shimmering, isn't it, in the first one?
Yeah.
Definitely sort of looks heat-based,
And that one is also one that's being lit up from the sun?
Yeah. As it comes above the illumination zone, yeah. I try and get the sun dead in the center, and there's just one point when these things go by, it lights up, and very often once they go past that point, they're invisible even to the ultraviolet. Now you can't do this in infrared because the infrared is so much brighter, and you just can't. The picture doesn't come out very well. So I use different techniques when I'm filming in infrared. But this is great. The ultraviolet filter I used, when I first got it, I wasn't sure how to use it because no one had really used it in this manner. And when you look through it, you couldn't see anything. And even if you light a match, you can't even see anything. So I tried filming straight into the sky, and a lot of things were coming out quite blurred. But what happened was I left it actually pointing up at the roof. And what had happened is, just by chance, the sun came up under the roof. And as I was looking through, I thought, wow, that's lighting up. Just when the jellyfish came by, I actually saw it come by. And as I was looking through the camcorder, and that's the first one I captured. And I thought, wow, this is how you do it. This is how I'm going to do it. That jellyfish was lit up. This is what I've got to do, light these things up, but not letting too much sunlight into the overall picture. So that's how I decided to keep the sun right below the wall, so that when these things come by, they're actually being lit up by it, but the camera's not seeing it, or it's only seeing a small part of it. So very often when the sun gets to the point it is now, rising up on the top of the wall, I'll adjust the camcorder view so that the sun's always kept down below the wall all the time, because it does rise obviously in the summer, and you've got to keep adjusting it so that it doesn't rise above the wall. Obviously you'll have a whiteout, and it can damage the equipment. So it's not easy to do this type of work, and these things are going by so fast a lot of the time. This is a strange one. Yeah, this is very strange. This is probably one of my favorite ones. This was going from left to right. I captured this in 3 frames, and as you can see, I mean, it almost looks like a silver can, doesn't it, in the middle with rods coming out. It's moving from left to right. Funnily enough, I mean, I always imagine it should be moving from right to left with the rods sticking out the back, but I don't know. It's a strange one, and you can see it, in these 3 different stills. And I don't know how to explain this. I mean, some people say this. One of my friends says this reminds me of. He calls this the light bulb, but it almost looks just biological. It looks like the moon almost, like biological, but with some kind of metal or something. I just don't know what these rods are, and I've never caught anything else like this. So there's some strange stuff up there, and this thing just appeared in 3 frames. This was recorded at I think it was 25 frames per second. So yeah, it's not very often I capture the same things. Now and then I will. There's a couple of things you've got that I sent you, I think, where there's 2 fish-like forms that look quite similar. So this was an early one. Yeah, this was.
This looks like a jellyfish here.
Yeah, this is like just not far from the day when I caught the jellyfish. It might have even been later that same day. I think this might have been my second capture. It's so long ago now, 2011. But yeah, this as you can see on the one on the left-hand side, you can see the object coming in to the illumination zone, and as it moves to the right, it lights up, and you see the whole thing. And this only appeared in 2 frames.
Yeah, Yeah, we have we have winter weather right now, so it's possible that he might drop. But it appears to me almost that it's like it almost looks like it's dragging like tentacles or something there. Like if you look,
yeah, it's a strange
here,
one. Yeah, it's
it looks more like a mushroom here, but
yeah, it looks like a seashell on the left when it first comes up. It always reminds me of like a pair of lips or something, you know.
Oh yeah,
but, yeah. So yeah, I mean, Trevor James Constable captured a few similar ones. Oh, this is so yeah, these are quite similar. These were captured 11 months apart above the same part of the roof. These are almost like fish-like forms, but they almost look like they've got propellers, don't they?
yeah,
and again, it was captured at 25 frames per second. Yeah, and if you look on the left-hand side one, if you look closely, you'll see it's almost like a star shape. It's got, I think it's got about four shapes out of the back. It, you know, I mean, it almost looks like in some ways, it looks like an air balloon or something, doesn't it? Like
that's what I was gonna say. This looks like a
yeah,
it looks like one of the old blimps.
Yeah, definitely. You can see it reflecting the light as well. This is a good thing about filming up at this angle, catching these things side on, because you can't catch them, you know, front on really, because they won't be reflecting the same. And these seem to be traveling from right to left. Most of them, I say 99% of what I capture is traveling from right to left above the top of the roof, which is west to east. It seems to be on a fast-moving flow, a very fast-moving invisible flow, with lots of tiny little bits as well that are flowing in it. Almost like a sea. Yeah, this is another strange one. I mean, some of these objects do actually morph and change their shape, and this is a good example of one of these similar types of objects. I mean, I call this the propeller. I call this the propeller. It always reminds me of a propeller in some way. But I captured this in 2 frames. I think it was going from right to left and above this particular roof. And I think just a part of the small propeller bit was visible in the second frame. But this doesn't make any sense, you know, aerodynamically or anything really. But as I say, I suppose it doesn't really matter because they seem to be moving on this west to east flow. It's, you know, I'm not sure if they've actually got propulsion. They just seem to be moving on this fast-moving flow.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if they're moving with like a jet stream or some kind of air, upper atmosphere wind.
Yeah, well, Dr. Wilhelm Reich talked about the orgone energy, which you talked about, this life force, or you know, chi prana, and he called it the orgone envelope of the Earth. He said that's what makes the Earth spin, the orgone flow, which actually spins the world, and it goes a lot faster than the physical, than the actual spin of the world. And it was interesting because he said that in this part of the world, the orgone flow goes from west to east, and I discovered that these were moving from west to east on a fast-moving flow, which was quite interesting. And is, you know, there's not a lot of research I can do into this to really prove it, but most say 99% of them seem to be moving from west to east. So I basically just set up and use the same setup. I use the same part of the rooftop, well, according to where the sun is, which times of the year, and I basically just film straight up the roof at 45 degrees. I'll zoom in up into the end of the wall or the top of the wall, or you know, this guttering stuff, and block the sun and just kind of wait. You know, and I use a Geiger counter. These things give a Geiger counter hit when they go by, so I know when something's gone by, even if I don't see it. But you know, I'm not always lucky. I mean, a lot of the time I don't capture anything. I mean, I can film for months on end and look through. I mean, you think I'm filming at 50 frames a second, that's 3,000 frames a minute. You know, I'm filming for 6-7 hours. And then I've got to look back, or, you know, these things appear on 1 or 2 frames. So it would take me months and months just to look through 4 or 5 hours of footage. And I was out there every day, sometimes 5 or 6 days a week, you know, filming for weeks on end. It took me years to go through it all. Literally, you know, I had to start wearing glasses when I finished doing this because my eyes were really good. You know, but after about sort of 6-7 years of doing this, I started wearing glasses. You know, I think it's 2016 when I wrote my book, Quest for the Invisibles. As soon as I wrote that book, I had to start wearing glasses. But yeah, there's a lot of time spent, you know, but it's worth it when you get images like this because, you know, they're once in a lifetime images. And, you know, I just find it very interesting to know what's going on out there in the invisible world.
Yeah,
Have
I
you
mean, how many?
done any? Oh, sorry. Have you done any kind of reflecting on what these may be, as far as yeah, are these something that might be just kind of crossing the veil of existence for a moment, or are they there all the time? Or would they be foreign or alien, um,
Well, they're suggesting they're
interdimensional?
alien. No, they seem to, we got to remember seeing these in the ultraviolet, and we don't see ultraviolet. So these things, I mean, a lot of them are self-illumined. They don't need lighting up, but many of them, you won't see them in the ultraviolet unless they're lit up by sunlight. So they're obviously existing in a realm which is the ultraviolet, but they're even invisible in the ultraviolet until you light them up. And that's the same with the infrared. Some of the things in the infrared, they're self-illumined, some of the entities, but sometimes you got to light them up or light the area up around them to make them appear in the infrared. So I don't know. I mean, I just think this is just another world that's going on. It's just another parallel world. It's an etheric world. I think these are etheric things, etheric life forms, because I don't think they're not mechanical. And they seem to be able to morph and change shape as well. Lots of them.
Right.
So there's bits in my book where there's an image of something moving and it changes shape in every frame. There's a certain part of it you can identify in each frame, but it changes its general shape. So I think it's just another world. I think there's the world like the infrared and the ultraviolet. You've got that there. You've got the infrared, which is below the red, before the red, and you've got the ultraviolet beyond the violet. So you've got two different vibrational like frequencies, so to speak. Before our color, red to violet, and after it. So we don't see. So there's two realms to start with: infrared, ultraviolet. I think some of these things can come into the visible as well, and they do come into the visible. I think they can.
Do you
I
think?
think they can perhaps change the density.
Do you think any UFO sightings that people think are corporeal may actually be these things that are temporarily coming into the
Yeah.
visible?
Mm. Yeah, well, this is what Trevor James Constable found. He found a lot of these disc-shaped UFOs were actual living creatures, amoeba-like forms. They were very disc-shaped, very round, and some very flat. I think a lot of these things are, and I think a lot of these things can disguise themselves as well. I mean, there's a lot of people doing this this UFO summoning thing. I mean, I prefer to call it calling. Where you can look to the sky and you can send your thoughts out, and these things will appear. And they appear as balloons. They appear as all sorts of strange things, and they can change their forms, and some of them can look like craft. I mean, there's a video on my YouTube channel. I think it's called Strange Visible Craft, and it's an egg-shaped object, which looks like it's got radar dishes on the side of it. And what happened was, as I actually saw it, this was actually invisible. I'd seen it all morning going above my research area near Oxford, and all I could see was a tiny little ball in the sky. And just as I was packing up, I had my camcorder, which was, I didn't have any filters on it, so it's seeing infrared, ultraviolet, and visible. And it's a really good one. It's got an eyepiece on it. You can actually zoom, use it like a telescope. What happens was I decided to zoom into this ball, and as I zoomed in, it must have been 1,000 foot high. As I zoomed in, all of a sudden, it was an egg, like an egg-shaped object with these weird-looking extensions coming out of it, which would look like radar dishes. And as I zoomed into it, it seemed to know, and it turned round. It was moving quite fast, and it just turned round, and I nearly fell over because it freaked me out so much when I zoomed into it. And there's a clear video of this on YouTube. And as it turned around, it changed shape. It actually went from an egg shape, and as it turned around, it went almost tear shaped, completely changed its form, and then went back into the shape it was. And I was so intrigued by it that I went out and bought some modeling clay and some wire and stuff because I was determined to make a model of this, and I couldn't make it. I got all the views of it where it was like an egg shape thing. So I made an egg shape, shape, and then basically I noticed as it turned around, it went tear shape. So I thought, okay, so to do that, I've got to flatten one side in. So it looks egg shaped from one side and then a lot thinner, like a teardrop from the other. But that's not how it looked when it turned round. It was fluidly turned round and changed its shape. You couldn't recreate that in the modeling clay. in the shape. I tried it with plasticine, modeling clay. I've never been able to make a model of it because it didn't make sense because of the shape it became. It went so thin, and as it turned round. The video of that is on the Quest for the Invisible's QFTI YouTube channel. It's called Strange Visible Craft. It's only a few minutes of footage, but you get a really clear picture of this thing. I managed to zoom right in on it before it disappeared behind a load of trees. And I actually ran around the garden to try and capture it again, and it just disappeared. It just seemed to phase out of this reality.
We'll definitely
I've seen
include
similar things in
the links to the YouTube in all of the description so that any listeners or followers will be able to seek that out.
Yeah, if you just put QFTI in, that'll take you straight to Quest for the Invisible's YouTube channel. I've just called the channel QFTI, which is for Quest for the Invisibles, obviously. And there's lots of interesting stuff on my website for people that are interested in this type of thing. There's ultraviolet footage like this, taken from camcorder footage. There's also infrared footage. I think I sent you some of the infrared stuff. My cat Roy's grave site, where I had a snake-like entity coming out from the grave. I think that's probably one of the pictures you'll probably get onto soon, actually. But this
I have them.
Yeah, this is 1/50th of a second. This is recorded at. This thing appeared in 2 frames, but in the first frame, there's only half of it appeared. But this is almost like a worm-like object, and again, this seems to be moving quite fast. It was either moving quite fast, or and I think it was. I don't know. I think at first I thought perhaps it just appeared and flashed itself. But then thinking about it, I did catch it in another frame, so it must have been moving quite fast, this one, from right to left. But you can see it's lit up by the sun. You can see the part at the top of the roof with the sun just behind it, which is creating that illumination zone, so that anything moving through or above is just illuminated, for a fraction of a second as it hits that point. Otherwise, if you don't do it right, you won't see these things. They won't. Half of them won't light up, apart from the ones that are self-illumined. But it almost looks like a chrysalis, doesn't it? I've done the black and white version in there, to give you more of an idea of bring out the shape of the chrysalis type effect on it.
It does. It almost seems like there's some kind of core, like where like it's emanating from, I guess you could say.
It almost kind of looks like that. It has like a horn shape too to it at the top.
Yeah. It's a strange one. I mean, then again, they're all quite weird. They're all one of a kind, really. And very different to, the standard UFO things that people are capturing. But, Trevor James Constable, the guy who influenced me, I mean, he captured a lot of biological things, and so did the GRCU group, the Italian group. And, I'm just basically carrying on what they were doing. So that was the ultraviolet stuff you've just seen that I captured using an ultraviolet camcorder and a 330 nanometer UV pass filter, which blocks visible light and infrared and passes the invisible ultraviolet. So they're all captured like that.
Do you think that you've ever captured the same being or entity more than once, or do you think that every one of these are all unique and separate?
I think they're unique and separate. Yeah, these are nighttime footage in the infrared. These were captured. I've got a research area. It's a couple of acres of land. It includes my garden, which is quite big, an acre almost, and a load of nearby land. And these were captured in the woods and high in the sky. The top right, that was like an orb. That was one of a group of orbs that were moving. And I don't use a flash when I take photographs at night. I take photographs in total darkness. I sometimes take long exposures of anything up to 30 seconds, and sometimes 1 second. It depends what I'm actually capturing. But these are picked up by a Geiger counter. I'm stood in the pitch darkness, total darkness, and I get a hit on the Geiger counter, because I'll explain about the Geiger counter. Basically, the Geiger counter measures the background radiation readings, which is generally just above. It measures in microsieverts per hour. And generally, the background radiation goes from about 0.09 microsieverts per hour up to 0.12. So it's just sitting around 0.1 microsievert per hour. Now I set mine for 0.20, which is much higher. It never ever goes up to 0.20 or higher ever through natural radiation, background radiation, because that's almost double the normal background radiation. So as soon as I get a hit on the Geiger counter, I set the buzzer to go off when it goes to 0.20 microsieverts per hour or higher, and I instantly take a photograph in the direction that I've got the Geiger counter pointing. So if the Geiger counter is pointing at 45 degrees up into the sky, I'll take photographs at 45 degrees into the sky. If it's straight in front of me, if I'm walking through a wooded area or somewhere, I'll take photographs straight in front of me. And I generally use a tripod for most of what I'm doing, unless I'm taking shots at 1/60th of a second or something. But when I'm doing the long exposures, especially like, the 1 second down to about 15 to 30 seconds, I'll use a tripod. But these are very individual things that I've captured. Many of them were high in the sky. And I use different white balances as well. Sort of like a white or a yellowy color. If you use the automatic white balance in the infrared, it tends to lean to red, and you get like a more reddy hue to the color. But these are using the standard setting, which is green grass. And that's the setting that shows trees as white, and the grass as white when you see in the infrared. That's the white balance you use. But I mean, this orb down in the middle at the bottom, it's got a face on it. It's almost got like you can see, I'm not sure how clear you can see that, but it seems to have eyes and a nose and a mouth on it. I'm not sure how clear you can see that, or if any of the viewers can actually see that clear. But this is just an example of a few of the things I've captured. Yeah. So this was taken with my next camera, next 5N.
While you're doing this, do you think you've ever maybe been contacted by them? Do they ever try to communicate, or are they just kind of just there and gone?
I'll get onto that with some of the photographs that are coming soon, because there's some strange photographs coming that I took when my cat died, and I'll get into all that in a minute. Yeah, this was taken in my garden. I was getting huge Geiger counter readings all around me, so I started taking photographs all around me. I actually used a flash for this. So what I'll do sometimes is use a flash, a standard flash, which is on the camera. And although I can see the standard flash going off, the infrared camera can only see a small part of the red of the whole flash. It will just see a small part of the barely visible red. But that's enough to light up these things and make them appear in the infrared. If without the flash, these things didn't come out. But when I used the flash, it just managed to light them up a little bit to make them come out. But these are actually shooting up out of the ground in front of me. Actually shooting up through the ground. They were coming out through the grass, through the grass, and through the pebbles and stuff in the driveway. There's a whole load of these things, very strange things these were. And again, Geiger counters. The Geiger counter was going haywire. I was getting hits like up to 3 times the normal radiation level readings.
Wow.
And I don't know what radiation it is. This is the thing. It measures X-rays, beta and gamma. And this is another thing I'm going to get onto later, because some of these things can affect you, how you feel as well. And I'll get onto a few things. But yeah, this was taken using a flash as well. I was getting repeated Geiger counter hits when I was aiming above a tree in the garden. So I took a whole load of photographs, and this came out on one photograph. Again, this is taken in the infrared. It's like something you hang on the Christmas tree, this thing. But yeah, again, this was illuminated. You can see the reflection of the flash. I mean, I saw the whole white flash go off, and I saw nothing in the sky, nothing. This thing was pretty low, right. So it caught the flash. I saw nothing at all, despite seeing the flash go. I think there's another one. Yeah, it's another one. This is just above the roof, above the TV aerial. Again, this was taken with a Canon G10, an infrared Canon G10. This wasn't about the standard automatic white balance. This is shifting towards a reddy colour. This is why it's red. You can see it reflecting the light again. But again, I was getting lots of Geiger counter hits up into the sky. I couldn't see anything, and I was in the pitch dark. I just started taking loads of photographs, and this came out in one, and didn't feature at all in any of the other photographs.
What distance do you feel that these are normally at from you?
Well, they're catching the flash from the camera, so I reckon they're within about 100 feet or so. Maybe higher, I don't know, but they're catching the camera flash. And as I say, although I see the white camera flash go off, the infrared camera only sees a small part of that white flash. It doesn't see any of the normal colors that make up the whole flash. It just sees a small part of the red, the barely visible red that appears just before the infrared. So there's not a lot of light coming out of it to light them up. But and yeah, this is one of my favorites. This was taken with no flash. I was in my garden actually, and in my research area. I had the camera set up on a tripod, and I was aiming the Geiger counter. I was stood about 45 degrees, aiming straight up, probably about 30 foot from a tree. This tree was about 100 foot, and I started getting like Geiger counter hits. So I started taking photographs. I took 3 photographs, one after another, I think at 1/8 of a second, and this was the second photograph. Now this seems to be part of a much bigger object. There's some part of this you can't see very well. There's actually another object which is being lit up. It's further up at the top. I'm not sure if I put that on here, but there's this. You can see this on my website. Yeah, there's another object which almost looks like a pulley or something, but it's a strange looking thing. But this is the main object is completely invisible. All you're seeing is the power source or whatever this thing is, and the intensity of light or energy. So basically, there's no flash. I saw nothing at all. I took 3 photographs, and the Geiger counter was going mad, and I thought I hadn't captured anything. Yet this thing came by, and if you lighten this right up, you can see there's a frame that this is part. This is fixed to some kind of frame, and it actually goes further to the left and further to the right, like it's part of a craft which is invisible. But only the power source or the lights, whatever these things are visible in the infrared. So this is it's one of my favorites. That one.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah, I'll try to do it up here. You see the second object at the top? Now that object is only that's only appearing in the infrared because it's reflecting the light from these. And that's so intense. You can see the different intensities of light within, and you can see some of these where there's none of them are lit, you know. There's obviously some kind of power source or something. I mean, this thing was heading straight above me, towards me, so this was at the front of it, whatever this was. And you can see like what looks like a bit of wire up there. I'm not sure if the viewers can see that. And there's several unlit sections down there. There's something sticking off up there. But I was getting quite high Geiger counter hits as this went over, just for a fraction of a second. This is about 3.35 microsieverts per hour. I think it went up to 0.6, you know, at one point, which was a high radiation level that this thing was giving off as it went by. And it was totally invisible. Totally invisible.
Strange. So strange.
It is. Yeah, it is. I went out every day in the infrared for 2 years, every day, and I captured probably about 15 things in 2 years, every night. This is another one taken. This is taken my research area in Oxford. And it shows a group. There's a lot more in the group than this. There's a few more. This is just the best 4. And this was taken at, I think it was 1/8 of a second. You can actually see a trail on the one on the left, which it's making as it's traveling. So these things are traveling quite fast. And again, this was taken in complete darkness, no flash. Complete darkness. This is one of several photographs taken when the Geiger counter went off, and this is the only one that anything appeared on. I caught nothing at all on the other photographs apart from complete darkness.
There's almost like looks like there's trailing on some of these.
It does, yeah. And if you lighten it up, you can see the trail goes a lot further. Whereas the other one isn't trailing. It's almost like it's a trail of its plasma. It's almost like plasma-like. It's
right.
It's like a repeat of the shape of it as it's moving. So and that, yeah, they're all very different in shape. Here we go. Yeah, there you go. I did this just to try and emphasize the different shapes, you know, of them. So these were totally invisible, you know, taken in complete darkness, no flash. I saw nothing. I was just going on a Geiger counter hit. The Geiger counter was aimed at 45 degrees, you know, and I got the hit on the Geiger counter and I just instantly took photographs, instantly, straight up at 45 degrees, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 photographs or whatever. And the Geiger counter only goes off for a fraction of a second. You know, it barely registers sometimes. It'll register and go straight back down. So you've got to be quick. I mean, most of the time I don't catch anything. It's not like you go out with it and you get a hit and you can capture something every time. It doesn't work like that. You know, these might be higher than where you're aiming, or they might be further away. And, you know, sometimes you can zoom in a little bit sometimes just to get myself a bit nearer any prospective objects. But you can zoom in too far and cut down your field of view. All these can be so far away you can't even see them. I think it almost makes me.
It almost makes me wonder if this is the possibility that this is one creature that's just moved so quickly.
Well, no, no, because there's a lot more below it. There's some more below it. That's just 4 I'm showing you on there. There's actually more. There's another few more below that are moving, which aren't as bright. Yeah, I mean, you do get things like that. I've taken photographs, especially with the long, say, 15-second exposures where you can see the movement of things. I've captured something quite similar to this where you can see the same, but they'll look the same in each thing unless they're phasing into a different shape. But I think it's evident by the trail on this bottom one that that's doing its own thing. I think because that's captured at the same, within a 1/8 of a second exposure.
Okay.
So it's doing all that movement within 1/8 of a second, whereas the others, you can't see any movement on them. But who knows? I mean, I don't know. But there's a couple of more. Okay, so in about 2016, I wrote my book Quest of the Invisibles, which featured a lot of the stuff you've just shown. Now, about that time, I lost my cat, Roy. He was a cat that I'd taken on. He was living wild in the garden. I'd take him on, had him for quite a few years. And in 2016, he got really ill and he died. And it upset me so much. So I decided to go out to his graveyard. I buried him in like what's called the Pet's graveyard now. It's a place just on the bank of an old riverbed and surrounded by forest in my garden. So what happened was I put him in a grave, put a headstone on it, and then I went out every night, asking him for a sign he was still around because I was so upset about losing him. And on the third night, 3 days after he died, I took a whole series of photographs. I was sitting alongside the grave. The infrared camera, was on a tripod aiming at the grave, probably about 6-7 foot away, well, maybe 10 feet away. And what happened was I got several Geiger counter hits, and I took loads of photographs, and in pitch darkness, no flash. And this was the first photograph I caught at Roy's gravesite. And that's a 1 second exposure taken in complete darkness. It's right above the actual grave, this is. It seems to be appearing above the grave. And I put a bunch of flowers on his grave, long stem daisy plants that afternoon as well. And the funny thing is, they actually look like that. It's almost like the form of flowers are being made at one point. It's almost like it's got these petals on it. And there's 2 bursts of luminous energy that are coming out. And I saw nothing. I saw nothing at all. Absolutely pitch darkness. I never see anything. And this is plasmoidal energy, it's existing in the infrared and it's self-illumined because it's not lit up by a flash, so it's appearing in the infrared because it's glowing in the infrared, it doesn't need lighting up to appear in the infrared. So this is the first thing I caught at Roy's grave. So of course I was out there every night and I only ever captured a handful of things at his grave, taken thousands of photographs. This was the next thing I caught near the grave. It's actually another 1 second exposure taken in complete darkness, coming out straight above the gravesite. It's 2 bursts of energy, and it seems to be like an entity. It seems to have its hands over its ears like this, with its elbows forward, and it's gone. It's gone. It's shot up, then gone to the left, and gone to the left. There's 2 separate things, but you can see it almost looks like 2 or 1 entities. But you can actually see a mouth and a nose and eyes on this one, and it looks like he's got his hands over his ears and his elbows forward like that.
Right.
Yeah, it's quite small.
Yeah.
I mean, I was probably about 10 foot away or more from when I took this, but you don't have time to compose the shot. Basically, you literally stood there in the pitch darkness, can't see a thing, and as soon as you get that vibration, the from the Geiger counter, you've got to take that photo. A lot of the time I'm constantly pressing the shutter button so that the camera is in focus, because when you take photos in the darkness, sometimes it gets out of focus because it's got nothing to focus on. So I'm constantly keep pressing the shutter button so that the camera is 99% ready in focus to take the photo should I get an indication from the Geiger counter. And this was another lucky one. I took this, and I said I've taken thousands of photographs. I'm out there all the time now taking photographs, hundreds of them every week at Roy's grave. This is the third one I caught at Roy's grave. And this was taken in complete darkness. Now I've got the photograph before this. I don't think I'll send that to you, but the photograph before this is pitch dark, and you can't see nothing. And this is the next photograph. That's the grave site, totally lit up. Now I'm stood perhaps about 8 to 10 feet away from the grave site. This is a 15-second exposure. This one is all of this has happened within 15-second exposure. There's like a snake-like entity almost coming out. It's got like ears and an eye and a bill. I'm not sure if I put another version of a close-up version of this in my next slide. Did I?
Yep.
Here we go. Yeah. And as you can see it, yeah, I was asking Roy for a sign he was there. I said, Roy, please show me a sign that you're still around, you know. And this was taken, I think, about a month or so after he died, I think, this one. And, you know, again, I saw nothing. This thing came straight out. And it was around this time I started getting a lot of paranormal stuff going on. Because I was out at the gravesite every night, you know, asking if Roy could show me a sign that he was still around. And I started getting weird stuff going on. I started hearing footsteps in my room. Things were moving. Things were disappearing. Lights were flickering. And this kind of kicked it all off, really. It's almost like I opened some kind of something, you know?
Like a portal or something. Yeah. Now, when you were out at the gravesite asking for Roy to show a sign that he was still around, did you have any like internal feelings or psychological nothing like that?
Nothing at all. No, nothing at all. No, nothing at all. No, I just took the photographs with the indication of the guide counter, and I was very surprised I caught anything because I was just in pitch darkness. I was very, very surprised. You know, and it's annoying, really, because, I mean, then again, I suppose it's a good job you can't see this sort of stuff going on, as it'd be going on all the time, wouldn't it? You'd be constantly seeing it. But, yeah, but, you know, as I say, it's no flash, you know, so there's no light source. This is invisible infrared light. This is actually happening in heat substance, in the infrared. And you can see the collar. You see where the head comes out. You can actually see what looks like on the face. You can see shimmering scales almost on it, and you can see where it forms from the collar. And it's got ears and it's got eyes. He's got little slitty eyes and like a bill. Now, whether this is my cat Roy in some other form or what, I don't know. You know, that's the question. But there's always a lot going on in that main photograph. There's a couple of other things. It looks like a face coming down at one bit as well. I think it's a photo before it. You'll see a face coming down to there, and you also see a thing coming out of the ground. It looks like a half human, half tree here. It's got a nose and eyes. It's not very bright here, but there's something coming out of the ground here. And if you lighten up the picture, you'll see a round portal shape around it. But you can actually see like it's got a brow and nose and eyes. You probably can't see that on here. But it's almost like a tree with a face. Very, very strange. And all that was happening within. There's like there's a brow there with the eyes underneath and a nose, and it's even got a mouth. But when you lighten it up, you can see it, but you can't really see it on here. So all these three things are happening. That's coming straight out the gravesite, and that head's gone whooshing. I think that's part of the head going. It's all happening within 15 seconds. It's all happening in pitch darkness, and I can't see anything. So I didn't feel anything. No, nothing at all. I didn't sense anything. I didn't see anything, and I was most surprised when I captured this. But I was very pleased because, you know, I was asking for a sign, and that's what I got.
Yeah, no, that's wild. It's a wild picture. With all this stuff going on around.
Well, I've got the one before it. In the one before it, you see, there's a little stick here. Right, in the picture before it. No, I didn't send you the picture before it, but in the picture actually comes before this. I took two photographs. Now the photograph before is this same scene, but total darkness. And you can see just about make out a tiny bit of a stick that's sticking up there because I think the moon was out. But and because it's a 15-second exposure, it's a bit overexposed. But you can actually see that when you do the two pictures one to another, you can actually see the central stick part of that plant there, and you can see the whole thing, you know, forming. And then you go back, you know, it's just 1 minute it's not there, and the next minute it's there. That's all happened in 15 seconds. And if I'd have taken a 1 second one, I perhaps wouldn't have captured the whole of the trails. I perhaps might not have been a good enough, you know, such a good photograph. So this is where my paranormal thing. Before this, I was essentially filming invisible UFOs, but this started me off on the paranormal trip. And I actually captured some entities in the greenhouse. 4 entities appeared in my greenhouse window, and there's photographs of them on my website. I got a guide counter hit, and I took a picture in total darkness. I had a camera around my neck, filming at 1/60th of a second. Sorry, taking photographs at 1/60th of a second. And I basically just took a photograph and used the flash. And the flash lit up the greenhouse, but it didn't light up the entities. It almost lit up the area around the entities and make them visible in the infrared. The one looked like a ghostly form, the other like a guy holding a lantern. The next one looked like an ET. The next one looked like a scene from hell. this thing that looked like it had horns, and it had like a cat or some creature also had horns sitting on it. It has these two faces with almost like white faces with black eyes and teeth. And then the last one I caught was this weird looking humanoid form with a huge mouth. They're actually on the website. I've got an evidence section on my website, which is different things, skyfish and invisible UFOs. It's got on there, and it's also got things like these pictures of Roy's grey site. But this is when it all kicked off. I started getting weird things happening. I'd hear my name being called, and my sister would hear me calling her in this house, because this is my sister's house. I live in a flat sort of on the same land next door, above the garage, and she would hear the door was knocking at 3 o'clock in the morning, and the doorbell was ringing. And I've got the doorbell basically set so it rings in this house, which is my sister's, and also in mine, so that if we get any deliveries, one of us can always hear it. And the doorbell was ringing at 3 in the morning, and no one could get in this property. We've got electric gates and everything, and but it started ringing at 3 in the morning, and I'd look out the window, and the lights hadn't gone on around the house, so it definitely wasn't a physical person. Stuff started disappearing, stuff started appearing, and it's gone on since. Really, what happened with Roy? Really, I'm not sure whether I must have opened up some kind of thing from. I was very upset when Roy died. I was very emotional, and I'm not sure if that emotion attracted something else or what. I don't know whether this is Roy showing me who he is, or whether it's this something else showing itself. And the same with the greenhouse images of those beings. I caught 4 beings, one after another, over about a month or so, and I've never captured anything since. I've taken thousands of photographs out there. Every night I'm out there, most nights taking photographs at the grave site, perhaps 4 or 5 nights a week. I'm not capturing anything. I'm not even getting any Geiger counter hits. So it's like a once in a moment photograph.
That's really interesting that you're kind of starting to get the paranormal activity along with this, and that you were able to actually capture the images, because I mean, as far as the paranormal activity and investigations go, it's kind of a pseudoscience. There's not really anything that is 100% effective in capturing any type of activity. So the fact that you've kind of developed and perfected this photographic technique.
Well, I've copied it, really. I copied it off Luciano Bocconi and his Italian UFO group, the GRCU. They captured a lot of strange things, but they were the ones who started using electronic devices. I sometimes use a compass as well. These things will, you get a hit on the Geiger counter, and you also get a distortion on the compass. Sometimes it'll be out by as much as 10 degrees. So something's happening, and a lot of ghost hunters and people use these EMF detectors, don't they? And they're measuring like fluctuations in the electromagnetic field. Whereas I'm using a Geiger counter, which is measuring, radiation, peaks in radiation. Now, I've just written a paper. I've just co-written a paper with my friend and fellow investigator, Leon Southgate, who's an academic orgone researcher. Now, we're speculating in this paper that this is orgone energy in a highly charged state, which is known as oronor. And I'll let you know when this paper's out. It should be published soon on an online journal, in an online journal. But we've been doing a lot of experiments, and Leon's done experiments with orgone energy. He used an orgone accumulator, and he excited the orgone energy to put it into an excited state, which is what Dr. Wright called oronor. And within that oronor, within that excited state, we got entities appearing, taking form in it. Oh shit! Dogs.
Sorry, that's
so, it's okay. My kids have been going nuts too. That's why I've been off mic for a lot of this interview.
Right. So there's a paper that's coming out soon that Leon and I have written, which is going all into this type of photography and talking about what we think this energy is, and why this, why that, and I'll let you know when that comes out. But that deals with a lot of this paranormal thing. But yeah, I mean, I copied the GRCU. I never had any idea about a Geiger counter until I heard about the GRCU using one. So I thought, okay, I'll get a Geiger counter. And they're very expensive. It's like a little tiny Geiger radiation counter, a handheld one. But it's not foolproof. I mean, I get hits all the time, and I take photographs and capture nothing. I mean, the last couple of months I've caught nothing at all. Well, perhaps the last 6 months, nothing at all. and and it gets a bit demoralizing sometimes. But back in this time, I was really into it. It was it was
I was
very
just gonna say that
exciting.
that's just yeah. I'm sure that you'll kind of ebb and flow. I think most of the paranormal investigations kind of have that ebb and flow, and you've had a dry 6 months, but you could then face another 6 months of just finding all kinds of awesome stuff. I think what you're doing is cool and very unique, and you've you've definitely provided a ton of captivating evidence. So Nick, we usually do wrap this up around an hour. Is
Yeah,
there anything that you wanted to promote again for our listeners? I do always include links, and I do my best
yeah.
to promote our guests, but I always like to
Yeah.
offer the last few moments to them to so that you guys
Well, I
can
think that,
you know
yeah, I mean, for anybody interested in this, I think really my website, which I set up back in 2016, is probably the best because I've got the best of my evidence on that website, infrared and ultraviolet. And I also explain how I captured the photographs. I explain about the infrared and ultraviolet and all the filters, everything you need to know about this type of photography and how each photograph was taken. It's all on the website. I've got an evidence section. I think it's about 12 pages on the website. And I've got a huge evidence section with different things like spirit sort of type energy, which is what we classify this as. And it's all on there. I think that's probably a good starting point for anyone. And it's got some pictures by Trevor James Constable and by the GRCU. It goes into the whole biological UFO thing as well. It's got pictures of theirs and pictures of mine. And yeah, and there's loads and loads of links on there to the papers and also different shows I've done and different talks I've done. So if anyone's interested, just take a look at the website, which is www.questfortheinvisibles.co.uk. And that'll fill
yeah,
you in.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And check out the book. There's definitely links for the book as well.
Yeah, it's
And
available everywhere the book is online. Yeah. Yeah.
awesome.
So
Well, thank you for joining us. This was riveting. It was
Yeah.
tons of really cool photographs and information that we're honestly still digesting. And now I'm just trying to wrap my
yeah,
head
brilliant.
around. Like I
Yeah.
said earlier when we first started, that this isn't really something that we see stateside as far as paranormal and ufology goes. So this is kind of like a whole nother chapter of things that we're now going to have to start researching on our
Yeah.
side of things too.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
but
it's been great to have the show anyway.
so thank you. We're gonna go ahead.
Yes. Thank you so much.
We'll hit our outro. Just stick with us for a minute after we're done recording, so we can make sure that your audio is good, so that we didn't waste your time. Okay.
Yeah.
And all right, everybody. Again, check out his links. Check out the book. Really fascinating stuff. The website is very thorough, and you guys will do yourself a service to check it out. Thanks for squatching, everybody.
Squash.